I pay your salary, bitch. The words exploded through Judge Judy's courtroom like a grenade. For one long, horrifying second, the entire world seemed to stop. Cameras froze. The bailiff's jaw dropped. Even the murmuring audience went dead silent as Judge Judy's eyes lifted. Not fast, not slow, but with the kind of deliberate, spine-chilling calm that makes grown adults wish they could disappear. Karen Mitchell, president of the Willowbrook Estates HOA and self-appointed queen of her neighborhood, stood there trembling with fake confidence, still trying to convince herself she'd just won the exchange. But she hadn't. She just triggered the most devastating comeback ever spoken on daytime television. For 30 years, Judge Judy had handled liars, thieves, narcissists, and manipulators, but no one had ever said that word to her face. No one had ever dared to call the toughest woman on American television a bitch while the cameras rolled. The producers would later say that you could literally feel the temperature in the room drop. Judy's hands didn't move. Her gavel didn't rise. But the way her eyes locked onto Karen made the nation's pulse quicken. And what she said next would become the most replayed moment in courtroom TV history. A single line that turned the internet into a battlefield of justice memes, reaction videos, and viral outrage. But before that legendary line, before the explosion that would ruin Karen's reputation forever, there was a story, a long, slow build of arrogance, entitlement, and karma waiting to strike. To understand why America's most feared judge finally snapped, we need to go back to the moment Karen Mitchell first walked through those courtroom doors. She came dressed like success itself, expensive blazer, glittering jewelry, and the smug smile of someone used to being obeyed. She wasn't just there to win a case, she was there to dominate. To her, this wasn't a courtroom, it was just another HOA meeting where she could bark orders and silence anyone who disagreed. But what Karen didn't know was that the woman she was about to face had spent decades dismantling people exactly like her. Judge Judy had seen every trick, every tantrum, every fake tear, and this time she wasn't just judging a case. She was judging a legacy of cruelty hidden behind manicured nails and fake professionalism. Because this case wasn't about a simple neighborhood dispute. It was about power, and what happens when someone who's never been told no finally hears it from the one person who can make it count. When Karen Mitchell pointed her finger at Judge Judy and screamed that she paid her salary, she wasn't just insulting a judge, she was exposing herself. Her arrogance, her lies, her years of manipulating neighbors through fines and threats were about to come crashing down in front of millions. And that's exactly why this story became more than courtroom drama. It became a cultural reckoning, a viral reminder that respect is not for sale. Before we reveal Judge Judy's legendary comeback that left millions speechless, hit that like button if you believe no one, not even an HOA bully, is above respect. Subscribe now so you never miss these courtroom moments where karma strikes back. Before the insult that made television history, there was the arrogance that built it. Karen Mitchell wasn't just any defendant, she was the self-proclaimed queen of Willowbrook Estates, a place where rules were more sacred than kindness, and Karen was their self-appointed god. She ruled her neighborhood like a tiny empire built on fear and paperwork. Her neighbors whispered her name like a curse, the woman who fined an elderly veteran for flying the American flag without proper HOA approval, who once charged a single mother $50 because her son's bicycle leaned against the garage for too long. Christmas lights? Against aesthetic guidelines. Flower pots? Unauthorized decor. And heaven help you if your grass grew half an inch too tall. 4 years she got away with it, bullying families into submission, collecting fines that filled the HOA's coffers while she called it community improvement. That sense of power followed her everywhere, including into Judge Judy's courtroom. From the second she walked in, the energy changed. The bailiff announced the case, but Karen was already smirking, clutching a thick binder like it contained divine law. She didn't glance at the audience. She looked straight into the camera as if already rehearsing her victory interview. The plaintiff, Maria Rodriguez, a gentle homeowner who had been targeted for growing flowers in her front yard, sat trembling, but Karen didn't care. To her, this wasn't a courtroom, it was another HOA meeting where her voice was the law and everyone else was there to obey. "Let's get this over with," Karen said to the bailiff, flicking her wrist dismissively. "I have a community to run." The arrogance in her tone rippled across the room. Even the bailiff's eyebrow twitched, the first sign that this woman had no idea where she was or who she was dealing with. Judge Judy looked up slowly, no reaction on her face. Just silence. The kind of silence that builds tension without a word spoken. Karen took it as weakness. She mistook Judy's quiet for indifference. She strutted to the defendant's stand, arranging her papers with the same overconfidence that had carried her through years of unchecked bullying. She waved legal documents in the air like trophies, quoting neighborhood bylaws with the self-assurance of someone who thought she knew everything. Every word that came out of her mouth dripped with superiority. "I've been president of the Willowbrook Homeowners Association for 8 years, she said proudly, "and I know exactly how the law works." Judge Judy said nothing, only leaning slightly forward, studying her. Every smirk, every interruption, every exaggerated sigh. Judy's eyes flickered to the audience for a fraction of a second, then back to Karen, like a hawk tracking its prey. Viewers watching the footage later would say that Judy already knew how this was going to end. You could see it in her eyes, the calm before the explosion. Because Judge Judy wasn't just listening to a defendant. She was diagnosing a disease, arrogance disguised as authority. And while Karen kept talking, digging herself deeper with every word, Judy's silence became more dangerous. She wasn't ignoring Karen. She was preparing to dismantle her. Brick by brick. Word by word. Until the Queen of Willowbrook learned what real authority looks like. And that day, it didn't wear pearls and a power suit. It wore a black robe and a look that could silence an empire. The case began like 100 others. A simple dispute over a $10,000 fine. But this one wasn't about money. It was about pride, ego, and the moment arrogance finally met justice. Maria Rodriguez, a quiet woman in her 40s, stood at the plaintiff's table clutching a worn manila folder filled with photographs and letters. Her hands trembled slightly, not from fear of losing, but from the memory of what it had cost her to fight back. She had lived in Willowbrook Estates for 8 years and poured her savings into a modest home she loved, until Karen Mitchell decided that her front yard was an eyesore. The offense? A small patch of colorful flowers planted in memory of Maria's late mother. No permission slip. No HOA approval form. Just a daughter's love expressed in petals. Karen had turned that simple act of beauty into a 2-year war. The fines began small, $50 here, $100 there, but they escalated like punishment for disobedience. Every time Maria paid, another letter came. Violation notices piled up like bricks around her life. By the time she stood in Judge Judy's courtroom, she owed over $10,000 in penalties and administrative fees. When Judge Judy asked Karen to explain the justification, Karen's tone was pure corporate condescension. "Your Honor," she began, her voice dripping with smug superiority, "the HOA has very clear guidelines on unauthorized landscaping. It's my duty to enforce those rules equally, regardless of emotional circumstances." Maria opened her mouth to respond, but Karen was already talking over her. "And let me be clear," she continued, holding up a stack of papers like evidence of her righteousness. "Every homeowner signs an agreement before moving in. If you don't like the rules, you shouldn't live there." Judge Judy's eyebrow lifted slightly, a silent red flag for anyone who knew her tells. But Karen didn't notice. She was too busy basking in her own performance. Maria tried again. "Your Honor, I planted those flowers after my mother passed away. I even offered to." "Objection." Karen snapped, cutting her off like a prosecutor in her own private courtroom. "This isn't about emotions, it's about property standards. People cry all the time when they get fined." The audience gasped. Even the bailiff glanced toward Judy, who remained unervingly quiet. Karen took silence as victory. She flipped through her binder, pulling out printouts from random websites. "These," she declared proudly, "are legal precedents supporting HOA enforcement power. In fact, I know HOA law better than most attorneys." The room erupted with quiet laughter, the kind that seeps under your skin when everyone but you realizes you've gone too far. Judge Judy leaned back in her chair, eyes never leaving Karen. Her tone was soft, almost gentle. "Go on," she said, her voice carrying the faintest trace of irony. "You're doing a wonderful job showing me exactly who you are." That line hit like a quiet thunderclap. The audience stilled. Maria looked up, hope flickering through her exhaustion. But Karen still didn't get it. She mistook Judy's calm for indifference, mistook that quiet smile for patience instead of precision. So she kept talking, digging deeper, waving her papers, listing violations, and painting herself as the guardian of order in a world of rule breakers. Every word tightened the noose she couldn't see forming. Judge Judy just watched. Every lie, every half-truth, every twisted justification, she logged it all with surgical focus. The longer Karen talked, the more powerful Judy's silence became. It wasn't passive. It was a countdown. Because in that courtroom, silence was the sound of justice loading its weapon. And soon, The woman who thought she ruled over others was going to learn what it feels like to stand powerless in front of someone who actually does. By the time Judge Judy began questioning Karen's documents, the entire courtroom could feel it, that invisible charge in the air right before lightning strikes. Karen's confidence had gone from smug to erratic. Her binder, once so neatly arranged, now lay open in chaos, pages spilling like the lies they contained. Judy's tone had shifted too, still calm but sharper, slicing through Karen's defenses with surgical precision. "Miss Mitchell," Judy said, flipping through the papers, "you've submitted these financial statements as evidence of HOA transparency. Are you aware that 3 of these forms are duplicates, and one was never even filed?" Karen's smile twitched. "Those are clerical errors," she said quickly. "It happens. I manage hundreds of documents. You wouldn't understand the level of—" "Try me," Judy interrupted, voice cool and deadly. The air thickened. The audience could sense the turn, that slow, inevitable crumble of a woman who'd spent her life believing she could outtalk anyone. Karen's hands fidgeted, her breathing shallow. "With all due respect," she began, her voice climbing in pitch, "I didn't come here to be micromanaged over typos. I came here for justice." Judge Judy's eyes didn't blink. "No, Miss Mitchell. You came here for control. And that's not what we do in my courtroom." That single sentence cracked something inside Karen. The authority she'd built her entire identity on, the fake power, the signatures, the HOA meetings where no one dared argue, it all meant nothing here. For the first time she wasn't feared. She was being held accountable. And she couldn't stand it. Her voice snapped like a whip. "You don't talk to me like that," she shouted. "I'm not one of your stupid TV guests you can humiliate for ratings." The room fell still. Maria covered her mouth, eyes wide. Even the bailiff subtly shifted his stance, ready for whatever came next. Judge Judy's expression didn't change. "Watch your tone, Miss Mitchell," she said quietly. But Karen wasn't watching anything. She was unraveling. "You think you're some kind of hero," she sneered, stepping forward. "You're not above the law. You work for the people. You work for me." Then, in a flash of blind arrogance that would echo across millions of screens, she screamed the line that would make courtroom history. "I'm not here to be lectured by some TV judge. I pay your salary, bitch." Gasps cut through the air. The bailiff froze mid-step. Someone in the audience audibly whispered, "Oh my God." Cameras captured every second, Karen's furious face, the trembling paper in her hand, the way even her own voice seemed to realize it had gone too far. Judge Judy leaned forward slowly, her hands folded on the bench. Her face was stone. Her voice was low, not raised, not angry, but cold enough to make the room hold its breath. "You don't pay for my salary, Miss Mitchell," she said. "You pay for your consequences." A ripple of disbelief swept through the courtroom. The audience gasped. Maria's eyes filled with tears of vindication. And for the first time, Karen Mitchell, the self-proclaimed queen of Willowbrook Estates, stood silent. Completely, utterly silent. But Judy wasn't finished. She straightened in her chair, her tone steady as steel. "And believe me, Miss Mitchell," she said, "you're about to find out what those consequences look like." That was the moment it happened. The moment arrogance met reality, and silence became the most powerful sound in the world. The silence after Judge Judy's warning was suffocating. Karen stood frozen, her mouth half open, her brain still trying to process the fact that she had just called the most feared judge on television a bitch. The entire courtroom was still, except for the quiet rustle of papers as Judge Judy reached to her right and picked up a thick manila folder. She placed it gently on the bench, like a weapon she'd been waiting to unsheath. "Miss Mitchell," she began, her voice calm again, dangerously calm, "you've spent the last 20 minutes trying to convince this courtroom that you represent order, law, and community. But the truth is you represent none of those things." She opened the folder. The sound of the clasp popping echoed through the silence like a gun cocking. "Do you recognize these documents?" Karen blinked, her arrogance faltering. "Those are HOA reports. Internal affairs." "No," Judy interrupted, sliding a paper across the bench. "These are court records. You've been sued 5 times in the last 6 years for harassment, intimidation, and misuse of HOA authority. And in 2 of those cases your own neighbors won." Gasps rippled through the audience. Maria's hands flew to her mouth. Karen's color drained. That's not relevant to." "Quiet." Judy's voice cut through the air like a blade. "You don't speak until I'm finished." She turned another page. "And this," she continued, holding up a single form, "is an official notice from the State Regulatory Board, confirming that you were fined for misappropriating HOA funds. You took $4,200 of residence fees and used it to pay for private landscaping on your own property. Karen's mouth moved but no words came out. The cameras zoomed in, catching the exact moment her composure cracked. Her kingdom of control, her empire of rules, her carefully polished image, all of it began to crumble in front of 12 million viewers. Judge Judy leaned forward, her tone like ice. "You've been bullying people under the name of community standards," she said slowly, each word landing with surgical precision, "but the only standard you meet is arrogance." Karen finally found her voice. "That's not true." Quiet," Judy snapped, her hand rising slightly. "You've done enough talking for one lifetime." The courtroom erupted. Applause burst from the gallery, real, raw, uncontrollable. Even the bailiff cracked a faint smile. Maria's eyes filled with tears of relief as Judge Judy's words settled into the air like a verdict carved in stone. Judy wasn't finished. "Here's my ruling," she said, her gavel poised. "You will refund every dollar this woman paid under your fraudulent fines. You will issue a written apology to the homeowners of Willowbrook Estates. And you, Miss Mitchell, will never again hold a position of authority in any community that values honesty." The gavel came down with a crack that felt like thunder. For the first time in her life, Karen Mitchell didn't speak. She just stood there, motionless, small, exposed. All her arrogance, all her power, all her control had vanished under the weight of one woman's truth. And in that moment, Judge Judy didn't just win a case. She restored a community's faith that justice still has a voice, and it speaks loudest when arrogance falls silent. If you think this was satisfying, wait until you hear what Judge Judy revealed about Karen's so-called community empire. Hit that like button and comment "Justice served" if you agree she got exactly what she deserved. The aftermath of Karen Mitchell's courtroom disaster spread faster than wildfire. Within hours of the episode airing, the internet had turned her name into a global headline. The clip of her shouting, "I pay your salary, bitch," followed by Judge Judy's legendary comeback, "You don't pay for my salary. You pay for your consequences," became one of the most replayed moments in television history. It was everywhere. TikTok edits, YouTube reaction videos, and Twitter threads dissecting every second of the exchange. Hashtags like #RespectTheJudge, #KarenDownfall, and #HOA humiliation dominated social media for days. Millions of viewers couldn't get enough of it. Comment sections filled with justice-fueled satisfaction. "This is why I love Judge Judy," one person wrote. "That line needs to be printed on t-shirts," another joked. Memes flooded the internet, Judy's calm face over the caption, "Consequences served." Even the late-night talk shows joined in, playing the clip with laughter and applause. One comedian quipped, "Some people pay their taxes, Karen pays for her consequences." It became the punchline of the year. But while the internet was laughing, Karen's real life was crumbling. The Willowbrook Estates HOA board held an emergency meeting the very next morning. News cameras gathered outside the suburban clubhouse as board members arrived one by one, none of them looking her in the eye. When they emerged 2 hours later, a reporter shouted the question everyone was waiting to hear, "Is Karen Mitchell still the HOA president?" The answer was swift and unanimous. Not anymore. Karen had been forced to resign. Her resignation letter, leaked to the press later that week, was a single bitter paragraph blaming media bias and online harassment. But the damage was done. Local residents held small celebrations on their lawns. One family even posted a sign in their flower bed reading, "Approved by Judge Judy." Meanwhile, Maria Rodriguez finally tasted the peace she had been denied for years. Her fines were refunded in full, and a formal apology was delivered, though everyone knew it wasn't heartfelt. Still, for Maria, it wasn't about the money. It was about dignity. For the first time in years, she planted new flowers, not as rebellion but as freedom. Bright tulips and daisies bloomed across her front yard, each one a quiet reminder that justice, no matter how delayed, always finds its way. Local news outlets replayed Judy's quote on loop for days. "You don't pay for my salary, you pay for your consequences." Anchors called it one of the most iconic lines in TV history. Editorials hailed it as a masterclass in humility. Even law professors referenced the case as an example of courtroom authority and controlled composure. As for Karen, her once pristine reputation was gone. Clients canceled listings, neighbors avoided her, and the HOA emails she used to send with pride now sat unopened, unread, and irrelevant. She had gone from self-proclaimed queen to public cautionary tale, proof that no amount of power or paperwork can shield someone from the truth. Judge Judy's words didn't just end a case. They started a movement, a collective reminder that arrogance, no matter how loud, always collapses in the face of calm, fearless truth. In the weeks that followed, Karen Mitchell's name became a symbol of what happens when arrogance collides with accountability. Millions had watched her fall, but what they remembered most wasn't her outburst, it was Judge Judy's composure. The world had seen something rare that day, power being silenced by poise. Karen had believed dominance was the same thing as respect. She thought fear made her important, that control made her untouchable. But when she stood before Judge Judy, every illusion she'd built crumbled under the weight of one undeniable truth: real authority isn't shouted, it's earned. Judge Judy's closing words still echoed across social media, etched into the minds of viewers who cheered for justice. Her tone had been steady, her delivery surgical, her message timeless. Court is not your kingdom, Miss Mitchell. It's the one place where your crown means nothing. That single line became more than a quote. It became a lesson, not just for Karen but for everyone who'd ever used power to belittle, intimidate, or control. Respect isn't something you demand, it's something you live in a way that earns it. And as the gavel came down for the last time, the crowd's applause wasn't just for Judy, it was for every person who'd ever been bullied, dismissed, or silenced. Because that day justice didn't whisper. It roared. If this story made you believe that arrogance always meets its match, share this video right now and comment, "Respect is earned." Don't forget to subscribe for more true moments where justice hits harder than any insult ever could.